We are live.
Hello and welcome everyone to the third virtual conference by Restaurant India. Today's discussion will revolve around impact on catering industry, mist and aftermath of COVID-19. I'm Preetima Bhardwaj, Project Head Webinar Series at Franchise India and a host for the session today. The agenda to be discussed during the session is, amid these unprecedented circumstances owing to the novel coronavirus outbreak, we are going to try and find answers to some of the questions that may have cropped up in the catering industry. Let me start by laying out the ground rules for our attendees. The discussion will go on for approximately 70 minutes. This will be followed by a Q&A session for next 20 minutes. If you have any questions during the course of discussion, you can post them through the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Mention in your question if it is directed at any specific panelist. We will take up questions post the panel discussion. Please participate in poll during the webinar. We would also like to request the attendees to keep the questions within the scope of the discussion here today. Let me now introduce our session moderator for today, Ms. Ritu Umaria, Editor-in-Chief of Entrepreneur India and Asia Pacific. Our panelists today are Mr. Sanjay Vazirani, Chairman and MD, Food Link Services India Private Limited, Mr. Sameer Lamba, owner Qualls Group, Mr. Tarun Sibal, co-founder One Fine Meal, Mr. Savar Malhotra, Managing Partner, The Embassy Restaurant, and Mr. Sanjay Kumar, CEO, Elior India. I would now request Ms. Maria to start the session. Over to you, Ms. Maria.
Thank you very much, Pratima, and very good morning to all the attendees. I see we have already got about 87 people who've joined us here today. So a warm welcome to all of you, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. Today we have a great panel of people from the catering industry. They are experts. They have done catering for big and small kind of gatherings in the course of their career. And probably, you know, while we have all seen ups and downs in businesses, but this is probably an external shock that's the first time an industry, or any industry for that matter, has ever seen. Now, while, you know, there has been a host of discussion in the past 25, 30 days about the impact on the food service industry and primarily the restaurants, where because of social distancing, people are not likely to go. But honestly, I feel that catering industry is probably even going to take a bigger blow because, you know, the gatherings are not going to happen. And as it is looking is that the government also might put out a directive to say that people beyond a certain number cannot gather together for a party, for a wedding or something else, which means that the catering business itself is going to probably have to relook or re-strategize itself in order to be able to meet its capabilities and see how their existing capabilities, which is to service very large gatherings, which is to do very large corporate catering, or whether it is to do party catering or social catering, how is that going to change? How is it that the work of the labor or the use of the manpower or workforce is going to change differently, look different than what it is currently? How is it that we are going to have to sort of address our facilities? What new parameters can we add into our existing sort of flow or existing workplaces so that we can up our revenues? Our supply chains of, you know, where we get a lot of food sourced from outside, and even working with our vendors who used to get a lot of gourmet food from us from outside is going to change immensely. And therefore, our business models again would need to be reworked. So given all of these realities, today we're going to discuss with our eminent panelists as to how do they see things changing in the coming at least one quarter. How are we going to make changes in our business, and some of the short-term changes and some long-term changes which will probably change the industry forever. Understandably, people are going to only trust brands in catering who are able to deliver high-quality food, are able to consistently promise hygiene, sanitization, safety of food, and good quality ingredients. So given that, let's understand from the panel how it is that they are planning to make sure that we are able to achieve all these measures together. So I'm going to start with Mr. Sanjay Vazirani today, who is from Food Link and has done some great work in the catering industry. Mr. Vazirani, while of course I understand that COVID and the scare of COVID is there, but of course it's not going to stay with us forever. Today, we've already seen that the retail shops have been opened up in the country, neighborhood stores have been opened up. So staggeringly, every industry is going to sooner or later open up. But what is more worrisome is how are people going to able to accept no social distancing and are going to come together for parties, or they're going to come together for gatherings. Now, given the change in consumer behavior, how is the catering industry or should plan for it in terms of, hygiene, safety of food, best course of action in order to ensure and give the consumer the mindset and the safety mindset, the helmet to say that, you are safe if you're eating from us?
Hi, Ritu. To me, the hygiene protocols, which have been just, a compliance and we have it somewhere at the back of our minds, will have to now become the religion of the day, that we have to be following good, production facilities, the good hygiene practices, what we call, or good production facilities, which we call, will have to be kind of, given a lot of importance and be prioritized as, the number one objective. To me, redefine training, redefining the hygiene protocols, following the government bodies, FSSAI's norms or the HACCP norms, will all be, order of the day, which we'll have to bring back very seriously into the business. Our production facilities will also have to be kind of, having a very serious focus on, the basic sanitization we do, or basic, thermal cameras, which we might have to bring in to assess, health of every individual. We will have to kind of, do very deep-rooted, comfortable training for our teams. Currently, COVID is like a stigma to a lot of, unskilled and semi-skilled people. And the way they are dealt with post that isn't very inspiring, obviously. So we'll have to, bring them to a comfortable situation where they self-declare if there's any issue to their health, or, all those kind of initiatives, I think will be able to, we will be able to kind of, inspire a lot of confidence in the guest. Videos for your production kitchens or your central kitchen facility, open to inspection kind of, approach that guests can come and walk in, or if they want to take a prior look at how we cook, what are our, processes, systems behind. I think these are a few things which would allow us to inspire confidence in the guest.
Sure. Yes, indeed. I think, and the more you're able to talk about it, the more you're able to bring that sort of areas and those practices in front of the customer, the more or the bigger his trust is going to be. So I think communication, as you said, is going to be extremely important to the customer to show what all systems you have put in place for the safety of the guest. The second thing, okay, so I'll come back to you again, Mr. Vazirani. I'm going to move to Mr. Sameer Lamba. Mr. Lamba, the whole quality or the whole beauty of catering was that you could always offer variety to the customer. You could give him any kind of foods. You could give him seafoods, which were coming from Asia. You could give him, the best of cuisines from the world. Now, and COVID is a global reality, so supply chains are going to get disrupted. We've seen supply chains get disrupted within India. But you can certainly imagine outside India, there is going to be a huge sea change in terms of what ingredients are you going to be able to get from international markets. Now, how are you planning for your change in your supply chains today? How are you going to go in for local sourcing? How are you going to go in for local foods being used? And how is it going to impact your revenues in the coming time?
So obviously, there is going to be a lot of upheaval in terms of imported ingredients, which we were so used to having. Over the past 10, 15 years, there has been a huge expansion in the kind of availability of raw material across India, and what earlier we were not getting, we used to get and we used to use, and serve obviously the same kind of dishes which were at an international level. Now I think we're going to go back to a period which is before that. there is a huge availability of material here anyway, but it's going to be more and more local sourcing. So we're going to have shorter menus. Caterers by nature are innovative, so they will innovate menus according to the ingredients they have, and we've got used to making some things and getting some things which are available ready-made from the market. Now it's going to be more and more of scratch recipes. Supply chain management is going to become very, very important. It's not only you, it's about rating your suppliers as well. We work with a lot of international and American brands. Every month, our supply chain manager has to visit the factory and approve it and see that that factory is following the standards which they're talking about. There are a list of certifications available which are industry standards for these manufacturing units. Let's take chicken, for example. Today, nobody actually is bothered where the chicken is coming from, but going further, it will come from a certified supplier who's following the hygiene standards which are requisite to this thing. So in an American brand, let's say we buy chicken from a factory, we inspect that factory, we make him meet our standards, he follows our standards of health, and then this is reviewed by reviewing this every month, and all these visits are not disclosed to the supplier. So our people can go visit the factory at any point of time as a surprise check to see that the material which is coming out of that factory is our standard. In terms of labor, again, we're going to go more and more into having labor which is full-time, and part-time people are only going to be people whom we can certify and be sure that they're following our standards. Training, which is absolutely non-existent in this industry as of now, is going to become more and more important. We're going to have to spend to train our permanent workers as well as our casual workers on how to handle food. All the systems, all the data is available worldwide on how to handle this, but it's more plastic and more show today than it being actually followed. Going further, I think we're going to take a call to follow this more and more stringently.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Lamba. Yes, indeed. I think, as you said, the training of the people is going to be the key. Mr. Sippel, let me come to you and ask you this. You know, we have built, in the catering industry, we have built capabilities which are for large events. 1,000 people gathering, 2,000, 5,000 people gathering. And I mean, this is one thing. MICE was only now becoming interesting in India, where in meetings, conferences, company gatherings had just started picking up, and people were wanting to do those big gatherings over there. But I think all that is going to come down. Now, for some, as a caterer, when you have built very large capabilities, you have a very large workforce. How are you going to contain that? What are you going to do with those facilities? What are you going to do with that workforce? So how are you going to change your business model in order to bring down your costs? What is your tomorrow's workforce looking like? I mean, are you going to send people on furlough? Are you going to reduce the workforce that you had earlier? So how are you going to sort of plan your existing capabilities to manage small gatherings, which looks likely the future trend? You are on mute, so you'll need to unmute, please.
I am actually.
Yes, we can hear you.
Am I? Well,
yes.
Thanks for the question, Ritu. Like any other business, we all work with installed capacities. And fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of people get married in India on the same day, which means that every caterer would be looking at 3 to 4 to 5 big gatherings on the same day. And our installed capacity is built like that. Our base kitchens, our central kitchen operations, and our workforce is built pertaining to cater to this high degree of requirement on a single day. Now that has going to go down. In terms of numbers, we're looking at a benchmarking of around 100 people, 150, max tops 200 people gathering. Now, how do we stay lean, mean, and still be effective? That will be the key question. So unlike what Mr. Lamba said, I think we will have to reduce some amount of our permanent workforce because the magnitude of operations will go down. A lot of emphasis will happen on training and how to effectively maneuver around a smaller gathering with same amount of effectiveness. The other thing is, how do we use our installed capacity in other areas of food business? So we will have to treat our kitchens like a factory corporation, and we'll need to look at every possible avenue to produce and cater, be it working with aggregators like Zomato or Swiggy, be it working with packed meals for institutional catering, because we adhere to all laws. We have a hygienic facility. We have FSSAI guidelines approved with us. We do our hygiene on. So we're actually sitting on a gold mine, because we are having a setup which takes care of all these possible norms that are going to be thrown at us in the future. And how do we maximize it? So we'll have to treat our kitchens like production units, like factory operations, and we'll have to max out our installed capacity, which may go out to catering, which may also go out to aggregators, which may go out to delivery. All these things will come into play to be viable enough to sustain the business.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mr. Sibal. I'm coming to you, Mr. Malhotra. Question to you is that what changes do you see happening in the menus? Are they going to become wider? Are they going to be squeezed down to what you have currently? And also in terms of the layout of the buffet, the style, with social distancing, and social distancing might just be here with us to stay. Even if the COVID goes away, people might still feel, wary of not wanting to close with other people, in close quarters with other people for some time, at least for like 6-8 months. Now, how do you see the change in the buffet and the layouts that we have been done? We used to such beautiful, lavish kind of events where there was great layouts. How do you see all that changing in the coming time?
See, I think the buffets, the number of dishes will primarily go down instead of going up. Instead of someone serving 200 to 300 dishes, they would be serving about 50 or 60. It will be more specialized in terms of what kind of menu, and the chefs have to be more innovative to actually bring about like a restaurant kind of style. Tarun also was saying this when we were having a discussion previously, that it would be more like a restaurant being set up for a party and then going off. And same kind of food will have multiple buffets. So like an Indian section will not be limited to one place. We'll have 2 to 3 of those buffets rather than having one, so that, not too many people are standing in queues. So that is what I think. And plus there'll be more of live counters and live kitchens, which will have to be set up for any gathering, so that any client is rest assured that they can view how the food is being prepared and everything is live. And that will increase. So obviously the menu sizes will go down. The number of operators of who are, in the production will go down, so that there are minimal human interactions as well.
Sure. Mr. Sanjay Kumar, I'll come to you, and, let's discuss a very important aspect of corporate catering. Now, corporate catering is not a very old concept in India. It was probably, maybe picked up, and really picked up in its entirety in the last 5 to 6 years. And today, offices still not opening up, offices operating at a 50% capacity, and all the compliances that you require to do in corporate catering only likely to increase instead of decreasing. How are you planning your corporate business? How are you looking to change your business model, the corporate catering business, in the coming time?
Okay, thanks, Ritu. First of all, everyone who's on this panel and on the webinar, wish you a very good afternoon. I know you're discussing something stressful, but it's, life has to go on. So Ritu, to your question about what's going to change in the food business for corporates. So I think if you break this whole question down into 4 parts, let's look at what's going to change for the customer, what's going to change for our people, what's going to change in the process on how we manage our production, and what's going to change in terms of the kind of assets we have and the infrastructure we need to build in order to be sustainable. So the one thing that I will begin by saying, which I know will be a bit disappointing, is every single one who is in this business has to be prepared that there will be an incident of an employee testing positive for COVID. Okay. no matter where in the country you are, no matter what business you do. We've seen this across the globe in all the countries that we operate. So the starting point is to have the BCP with your customer to understand what is their BCP, what's your BCP, and instead of getting into a blame game, having the plan that both of endorse of what happens when either the employee who's consuming the food at work or the staff who has produced it tests positive. So that's one part with the customer. The second part is a lot of panelists alluded to, the delivery model itself on the customer sites is going to change. Now, what's going to change there is going to be a higher requirement for less contact in enabling the consumption of food at work. This will require packed meats to be served, and this will require technology to play a big part. So one of the advantages we've seen, you've had, and now will become very critical, is we have our own payment ordering platform. So an employee really doesn't need to come to the cafeteria to see the food. The pictures are uploaded. He sees the picture, he orders it, he gets the intimation, he comes, he picks his pack. He doesn't have to get into contacting anybody or touching anything apart from the packet that he's picking up. The technology is going to play an increasingly important role in both enabling social distancing as well as managing your inventories for raw material and producing more tightly, because menus are going to get crisper, as somebody alluded to, and food is going to be served in packets, at least for the shorter term. So from the customer's end, there's going to be a lot of things which will change from the delivery model, the kind of menus we will now deliver, and how we will deliver. If you talk about people, I think across the board, including us, we had 5,200 people on payroll. We were producing 210,000 meals a day. That's going to be a dream that we will talk for the next 12 to 18 months. Only two things can change what the scenario is currently. Either we have a cure for the COVID problem or we have a vaccine, both of which is 18 months away. In the next 18 months, the biggest impact that you will see, apart from the drop in revenues, is the number of people who cannot be gainfully employed in this sector, no matter in which company they're working across India. Some states may be more, some states may be less. What will recover faster though is the food that we do in factories, the Ashok Leylands, the Pfizers, because manufacturing will lead the rest of the sectors, followed by education. So we do a lot of food, say at private colleges and hostels. That will recover faster because they will come back to the campuses, especially in higher education. Healthcare will remain where it is as it gradually limps back. So as you see manufacturing recovering, and manufacturing will have to adopt the model it always has. You can't do social distancing on the shop floor. You can at best ensure that there is safety and protective equipment. One of the good things which will come out of COVID is, and many panelists refer, is greater focus on personal protective equipment. I think everybody who's on this panel has kitchens which meet ISO 22000. So that's not going to be a big issue. All of us have kitchens which are state of the art. The bigger issue is most of us don't have the kind of PPE we need to produce food in today's environment. You're short, we do food at some hospitals. You don't even get hazmat suits right now. How are you going to take it to the ward where the patients are? So there's a delivery problem there. So the PPE for our people is going to be the big driver that will change in terms of how food is cooked and served. And in terms of process planning. So for example, when we produce 210,000 meals, everything is on a menu management software, which then talks to SAP for getting your inventories. I think supply chains will now be focused on more of local sourcing than international sourcing and imports, given the various complexities that will emerge, which is not bad for the food business, because local sourcing will also allow us to build recipes which are in tune with the climatic conditions and what most people have grown up with eating. So it's healthier, it's more fresh, it's local. What we need to ensure is, yes, if you want a 45 mm onion, you're getting a 45 mm onion, and that it doesn't have to come from Turkey. So these things will change. Local sourcing will be a big driver of recipe development, but the complex recipes will now go down. You will want simpler food, packed food, and in terms of infrastructure, you will want less physical handling and more mechanical handling in the kitchen. So you will see more of, the rotational ovens and stuff like that coming in onto the kitchens so that you minimize contact and therefore reduce waste. So that's the way I think we will be impacted from a financial perspective. Anybody who doesn't have cash now is not going to have a business for long. So that's the sad part, but it's the truth, because this is one sector. No bank is willing to give a working capital line. Yeah, for a variety of reasons. You don't have monetizable assets. It's light on capex. It's the absence of GST makes it cash driven. Input tax credit makes it cash driven. So recovery will be premised on how good your working capital needs have been met. So that's what I would say is, I don't want to take too much time on this, but yeah, those are the 4 or 5 things on the top of my mind which will impact our business, and therefore this is how we are addressing it.
Sure. No, I think those are some very good points you made, Mr. Sanjay. But let me ask you this, and I think you've sort of already put a foundation to this, Mr. Sanjay, but and this is to the entire panel. Now we have got capabilities. Can we look at other places where we can service the food that we create? We were, the other day we were talking to chefs, and they were talking about meal delivery kits, wherein, people who can have a party, but they don't want your staff to come, but you can actually deliver them 80% prepared food, and the rest they could do at home, and maybe send one chef or something, and they could just have a party at home with less external staff. Now, do we have such models in mind, or we could be servicing to airlines, we could be servicing, we could be an ancillary to IRCTC if that is possible, or look at other avenues, maybe schools also. Today, schools have such big catering, big schools at least, hostels, residential schools. They all need capabilities for kitchens, better food being serviced to them. So do you see such new business models evolving for catering companies? That is my first question. My second question is, now, I don't want to put it this way, but this is going to be a reality when, Mr. Sanjay said that the people who will not have cash will automatically wither away. But do you think this could be a great time for mergers and acquisitions, wherein smaller catering companies could actually merge in with bigger catering companies, and there could be a utilization of resources, talent, infrastructure, equipment, whatever it is that smaller catering companies might have that could actually be pushed into or be merged or absorbed by the larger company. What are your thoughts on it? So let me start with Mr. Sanjay Vazirani on this. You'll have to unmute, sir. Mr. Vazirani, please unmute.
Yeah. So Ritu, COVID has triggered dramatic, business disruptions globally. And in this tide, there are a lot of people, who are going to be kind of up for a situation where they don't see a longer path forward or don't see end of tunnels. So obviously there will be economic turmoil, and the depressed stock prices, there will be unsolicited acquisitions. Some hostile types which are forced, where people will have to have their plan if they want to refrain from those, and some could be a strategically and collaborative kind of alliance or acquisition where, as you said, common resources could be commonly used. Maybe somebody has, maybe a frozen food business, and we can bring him into our, divide our capabilities of, central kitchens where they could put a little extra equipment to be able to do frozen food. In fact, we as a company are also, looking at doing, QSR kind of a model. I mean, this thought is just 30 days old, where, we run restaurants also as a company.
Right.
We have a brand called China Bistro, and we are looking at doing China Bistro Live, which would, be a pan-India plan where we do small kiosks with, refrigerating or maybe, frozen food, which we are exploring. We've been doing some, conferences on Zoom with some top consultants to understand that how do we kind of, divide or amortize the kind of costs which we have at the back end. Apart from that, I think intelligent strategic acquisition, I think will be quite a few on the cards. smaller companies would want to be kind of, collaborating with larger companies if they have deeper pockets to be able to kind of do a better EBITDA based, business as we go forward.
Correct. And I mean, any thought on other innovative business models? I mean, Mr. Lamba, if you have any thoughts on this, Savar?
On the business models which going forward, obviously supplies to existing restaurants and to IRCTC, like you discussed, is one thing. Schools itself is a huge business. The health standards to be met in school are much higher than regular catering. So it could be, it's a very good avenue. It could be, but it's an avenue which you need to be very careful about your hygiene and health and storage. So the entire chain from your kitchen to delivery of the food to where you are taking it has to be mechanized, and the food has to be kept at a certain temperature, which is the basis. And for this, the investment required is going to be a big sum. The idea of taking over caterings is one thing which I don't know will happen or not, because basic catering units worldwide are traditionally very localized. So you would not have a catering company which is working in multiple cities, even in the US. So you would have some caterer who's very big in one part of the US and some caterer who's very big. Same is here. All the catering is very localized. So you generally, when you book a wedding or something, you go to a caterer who's from your city and who's famous in your city and who's got good food and what he's doing. So taking over, I don't know, but as a merger, yes. So you could basically have 4 or 5 caterers get together across cities and say that we would swap businesses across cities and we would have a bigger say on what's happening. What happens with weddings, especially Indian weddings, are that they're held on one day and there are a large amount of gatherings on one day. So all the pressure of having a wedding in this quarter is going to get shifted to another quarter. So let's say all this opens up and we have a cure maybe February next year. So we're going to have a sudden spurt in weddings in February. So most people will have to live till then and play till then, and then you're going to have a day where you're going to have 25, 35, 45,000 weddings. And those days are going to, because people are going to put this off. Another interesting factor is that a lot of catering business is going to come back to India. So destination weddings itself are going to go down. At the moment, there's a huge trend of having these weddings abroad in certain destinations. I believe all that will go away and that business is going to come back to India, which is another avenue and revenue for us. Obviously there's a huge change. It's a huge change for everybody, and it's a wake-up call for us, especially in terms of food handling. What we used to take as a regular thing, we need to really focus on that. And the winners are obviously going to be people who are going to be able to communicate this to people more effectively.
Sure. I also see that our audience is asking great number of questions, and they're all from the catering industry. So I think let's also involve them in the discussion. I see Ninad has a very interesting question. Can we give the audio to him, Chirag? Ninad, are you there online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, morning everyone. There are 4 questions which I have raised in the Q&A. What are the new workplace products and services and beyond workplace market solutions which could be offered by the catering industry? So that is one of the questions I had in my mind. The other one is, of course, in terms of growth strategies for the future. We all know that it would be quite challenging, knowing the numbers for particular catering industry and also restaurant. How could we redesign and adopt flexible labor model? Because that's going to be the very important aspect in maintaining the cost and optimized model. How can we increase our usage, through online ordering and tech solutions, and what is offsite catering solution that we can offer? So these are some of the pointers I had in my mind. I mean, I placed it also in Q&A if you want to have a look at it, and if anybody would like to share their views, and would be a great.
Are you asking this to anybody in particular?
Well, I think Sanjay and I think all other panelists, if they want to put some light, would be great guidance for us.
Sure. Mr. Vazirani, we can start with you then.
So, as far as utilization of your asset or sweating the asset is concerned, I think, there are an array of ideas which, of course, all are being examined by quite a few like us today. As we go along, catering can be in various formats, we feel. I'll only talk about, a little bit what we do at FoodLink. We have, verticalized this business already into 4 models within the catering domain. So we have something called FoodLink Luxe, which is luxury, people who have no budgets and unending. In fact, Ritu, I would request you to show one of the videos which, we have kind of given to you. So that's a luxe model of FoodLink where, guest is more concerned about the quality of delivery than the price, the right-hand side of the menu, what you call. We have something called FoodLink, a Privay, which is premium, which we run between Bombay, Ahmedabad. We have a base, and now recently Chandigarh, we have put a complete back-end integration in Mohali, and we are doing Punjab, a lot of caterings. In fact, coincidentally, April was, going to be a record month for us in April there for the premium catering model. Then we have something called FoodLink Corporate, where 800 to 1200 rupee price bands. We are running menus, and those are different phase people who are a different face of FoodLink, who market. The pitch is different. The production capability, all of it is same. And now we have something called FoodLink Boutique, which I think is going to be the need of the hour, where 50, 60, 70 people catering. We could do with a reoriented one cuisine menus, maybe super specialized. I would benchmark a Bukhara kind of a situation where menu is limited, but 25, 27, 30 years it's been relentlessly the India's best restaurant. So those are the few things which as an initiative we have at our kitchen, where we are able to amortize. We have 30,000 square feet of facility in Mohali, where all these 2 verticals we have rolled out, 2 more verticals we roll out. Then we are doing justice to the size and the investment we have made there.
Sure. Can we play the video?
So now this is, you know, the luxury model we talk about versus the same food production facility. Ritu, there's another video which, you know, we are doing a project on khichdi where we are kind of serving around 35,000 meals to support, you know, the current scenarios with the Bombay Police and the local Bombay Municipal Corporation authorities. And same facilities, same team members, we have been able to do a, you know, 18, 19, 20 rupee meal for the NGOs, you know, Reliance Foundation and Ruya Foundation, all of them have been taking use, we are making use. And that gives us a lot of, you know, inspiration that a 20 rupee meal could also be kind of churned out, and a you know, 7, 10, 15,000 rupees per head meal can also be churned out with, you know, capability like ours.
Sure. Chirag, can you play the video? Sure. So this is quite interesting, Mr. Vazirani. Now my question to you is, do you think going forward, I mean, you know, everybody in the catering industry, typically there were specializations. You know, somebody specialized in weddings, and then somebody specialized in a certain kind of parties, and then somebody specialized in MICE catering. Do you think there could be like multitude of, you know, specializations that a single caterer could have? And also to be able to achieve that multitude, you know, like it happens in the manufacturing sector, wherein, you know, you have one auto company which assembles the car, but there are like 1 million units back there which are trying to do all the work for it. Somebody is producing the seat cover, or somebody is producing the engine, or somebody is doing something else. So do you feel that the opportunity going forward is to be do many things and have a lot of partners, or it is more to do one specialized thing only?
No, I think my view, it is a collaborative growth which one has to look. A very intelligent modeling of, you know, in-house and outsourcing should be done. As Mr. Lamba mentioned, you know, you should control quality checks of your, you know, outsourced vendors, whether it's, you know, a specialist doing a Hyderabadi biryani for you, or somebody local making a vada pav, you know, or a pav bhaji for you. If you're able to control the quality, and if you're able to benchmark a similar outlay of, you know, touch points of hygiene, which, you know, you follow, I think to grow, it's important to kind of collaborate and have these, you know, modeling of outsourcing as well. Having said that, I think if all of us view in our business ourselves as a large platform where, you know, whether it's a corporate catering or whether it's a verticalized luxury catering, maybe on the social side, even celebrations of corporate is a very big market. You know, every year, 27th of December, Jio celebrates its annual day, and as many as 45, 50,000 people, you know, they kind of do a carnival meal which starts 12 noon and ends at 10 in the night. Those kind of, you know, opportunities also are aglow. Of course, for this next 12 months, maybe upper limit 18 months, all this might, you know, go away for the reasons of the cost consciousness of people, or, you know, averse to travel mindsets, or for that matter, social distancing. But I think opportunities are quite a few. You know, catering companies, if they have the infrastructure, it could be kind of amortized in various ways.
Sure. Mr. Sanjay Kumar, let me ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Vazirani. If you can unmute, please. That do you think as a corporate catering company, do you see yourself doing a lot of other catering as well? You know, you see yourself venturing into wedding catering, and do you see yourself doing other party catering?
Well, one of the challenges I have is that whenever we discuss catering, we think wedding, but it's probably just 3% of the total outsourced food market. In India, the outsourced food market is expected to be at about 6.7 billion USD pre-COVID. Wedding is a very small portion of that. Second, to the question of what will change and will M&A happen, I know a lot of panelists felt it will happen, but I can assure you no M&A will happen in the catering industry in India. The reason being the return on capital employed is just not worth it to put money into the business. Today, capital is chasing many opportunities. So unless the model is going to generate anything between 8 to 13%, it is unlikely to attract investment, especially of an M&A kind where the need for platform building becomes high. Does the opportunity exist in India? Definitely does, because India lacks the kind of formats that the Western world has. To the point somebody made that catering is local, that also I disagree. Food is local, catering is not. Catering as an industry is pan-national anywhere in the world. Food is local. So the food you have in the north of Italy could be different, slightly different from the one that you have across the border in France, and the one you have in the north of India will be different from what you have in south. But the same caterer could do the food. Okay, so the delivery model does not change, the cuisine changes, and that's where India has a lot of catch-up. So the unfortunate answer to both your questions of whether a B2B model can adapt itself to B2C, I don't think it is possible because of various reasons. We've tried this personally with Zomato because they are one of our strategic partners. The kind of infrastructure that you need to produce fewer meals is completely different from the kind of infrastructure that you need to produce larger quantities. It is like saying, can I commercialize a Dilip Chhabra customized vehicle and set up a plant for it? The answer is no. Can Maruti do a Dilip Chhabra vehicle? The answer is still no. So we cannot modify a B2B model to become B2C adaptive. You might be able to, tweak it a bit. So the bottom line is that the only way to survive, in my view, going through this crisis is to focus on your core competencies and leverage that to have a more lean model, which allows you to manage your menus more efficiently so that you cut your cost of production. And that's what becomes more, allows you to be more sustainable. To believe that you will overnight develop competencies to service other segments. We do schools, we do food in schools, including pathways in Delhi. But the set of competencies I need to do that is very different from what I need to do, when I'm doing a hospital in Pune versus when I'm doing food at Goldman Sachs in Bangalore or Amex in Delhi. So the model that is not so flexible that you can just transplant the skills. I mean, in healthcare, you need 5 different kinds of, verticals within that healthcare delivery system for the food itself, patient food, visitors food, caretakers food, so on and so forth. So the food service model will increasingly depend on technology to adapt to this crisis than on rejigging its model per se. So how can you use technology to manage cost better? How can you use technology to manage delivery more efficiently, reduce waste? Because unfortunately in our country, most of the margin lies in the waste. So for the restaurant model, it is completely different. You adapt and you produce to requirement. But in the B2B model, you produce to, forecast, you produce to hypothesis. So that's why technology is going to be the big driver for, survival as well as cash. But rejigging the business model overnight and hoping you will have the competencies, you'll just end up burning more cash.
Yeah, but while I buy your point, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, but I beg to differ also because you mentioned about Zomato, and today look at Zomato within weeks turnaround time, they moved from restaurant delivery to food and grocery delivery. So obviously adverse times call for looking at opportunities very differently, and sometimes opportunities may just need some different lenses to be made. But having said that, it's an individual call, and you're right, overnight building capabilities would not be possible, but again, doing something with it might be. We have another interesting question.
Ritu, I would like to add to what you said, maybe Sanjay Kumarji runs Outfitish, which is grown beyond a size. For us, who are still mid-level managers of business and, small and medium-sized businesses, there we have more flexibility and we have more, ease to kind of adopt. Unlike, once you've grown into 2 lakh, 3 lakh meals a day, then it might be a little difficult to kind of, change the direction. While here we are talking of logical extensions of business. When we were doing, catering, we said, if you do a catering for, say, Anita Ambani, then, what happens to the viability of the company? It could be only 1 or 2 or 5 families in the country like that. So we went on evolving. And I think today also, if we evolve into, kind of just putting a blast freezer and start doing some mall concept or some chilled food concept into and just utilize the same source in terms of human resource or in terms of the corporate teams we have, in terms of the marketing teams we have, I don't think so there's much investment and still we can get some decent output. But having said that, we haven't gone through the process, so I'm fairly bullish, but I think it's possible.
And as Sanjay was saying, that our technical competency is food, and we can evolve in that area. I believe dining in is a big opportunity for anybody who's in the food business. People are going forward. I don't think so how many people are going to cook at home. They're any which way is not going to restaurants. They will distance themselves. So ordering in is a big opportunity for everybody in the food business. And if we can create an impact with our existing facility, with our existing infrastructure, people like us do not need to add capital to increase our infrastructure to open a new venue for delivering. And I think that's a key opportunity that any caterer would eye on, how to get into the households of a particular set of customers.
Ritu, a couple of years back, I just started this concept, which was of giving food by portion, like catering to a party of 20 to 40 people by portion. And I think that would really come up as well. And the B2B market will increase also, like Mr. Kumar said, that the manufacturing units will increase. So yes, small caterers will also want to target that area and do catering for them. We did cater to Sony India for about a year, and wherein we were doing for the cricket matches as well. But, we would not now be shying away from catching more corporates and manufacturing units as well. So that will be a change because we are a small unit as well, and we can, we can take up that business.
Sure. We have a question from Mr. Ankit Yadav. Can we give him the audio, please?
Hello, everyone.
We can hear you, Ankit. Hi.
Hi. Actually, my question to the panel is, what do you guys think that the local authority or the government will be putting a cap on the number of people you will be inviting to the party? I mean, I think what type of the catering, what I do wedding is normally from 500 to 1500 people and from Indore. So what do you guys think that the authority will put a cap on the number of people you have to invite? This is my question.
Ankit, I think initially there will be a capping on any social gathering, keeping in mind the social distancing norms. But going forward, I think in terms of consumer sentiment, the guest himself would be quite cooled on in terms of social distancing. They would bring down the numbers themselves. They will want to be responsible enough. A month, as in a year from now, I would not want to be hosting a 1,500 people party because we are scared yet. It's not fully, we're not away from COVID already. So I think the government as well as your own responsibility would be there. So the numbers will go down.
Sure. So our next question comes from, can you pass on the mic, Chirag, to Anshu Jhunjhunwala?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Anshu. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm Anshu Jhunjhunwala and I run a private catering company in Bangalore. It's called Food for Thought. And of course, we've all taken a huge hit. We've been doing small gatherings as well as corporate caterings, but now everything has stopped. So my question is to Mr. Sanjay Vazirani, that what kind of changes can we bring about in our style or formatting of outdoor catering that we've been doing all this while, with all our lavish setups and everything. And also being a chef-led company, like I'm the main chef of my company, and luckily it started as a home kitchen. And so I don't have a outside overhead and all that. To God's grace, I've got that. And running it, serving 500,000 people. So what kind of a model do you think would work now? Still, if we want to do our corporates, we want to have our private clients, still run the corporate business and the catering business.
So to me, Anshu, if you're a chef, then you should do focused menus, and the dining concepts you should create, which would be for a smaller number of people. In a location where 20, 30, 40 people could be managing their social distancing, and yet you could lay buffets in some way, or you could do interactive cooking for that many. I think that is the model which would, I think, not die completely, because people are not going to just sit. Just to give you a context, when this started, we run this China Bistro, India Bistro, and Local Junction, 3 brands of restaurants. And the first 10 days we kept them shut. The location I live in, Bombay, is Chembur, where I have emerged. I used to be a restaurant manager here around 18, 19 years back, and from there we have built this foodling business. And I've grown here. And I think there were at least 50, 70 calls I was receiving every day that why don't you kind of, allow your China Bistro to do home deliveries. And I was quite unsure at that point of time. And the moment we opened one takeaway, kitchen from Chembur, I think all our China bistros currently are open except for Hyderabad, where there's a norm that even Zomato and Swiggy is not happening. So obviously, eating out or partying or these cultures are not going to perish permanently. Maybe you'll have to have some patience, create something distinctively different. If you have a differentiator, then you'll be able to, because small catering, I think there must be thousands and thousands of players, who work from home and do small caterings. A bigger threat to, I think Sanjay Kumar ji will also agree that it's been, the standalone operators or mom and pop shops who eat into these businesses and don't let them be so profitable. But if you're a chef, you should try and do some dining concepts which are unique. And as soon as, things easen up a little, they will get in demand.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Vazirani. We have our next question from Mr. Karthik Mathur. If we can pass in the audio, please.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So my question is open to the panel. And my question is, how do you see niche catering businesses like airline catering and airport restaurants dealing with cost optimization, considering that there are committed investment obligations towards things like security and training, which are non-negotiable? Also, along with the fact that there is complete uncertainty over demand and service delivery. So, I mean, anyone on the panel can take this.
Mr. Lamba, you want to take this?
Yeah, so on the airports and airlines, the biggest problem today is let them at least open. If they don't open, there is no business to be done. GMR and the GVK airports have already applied for concessions from the government and as well as the banks already. And hopefully they will pass this on to the restaurants which are operating in these airports. Everybody is obviously demanding these concessions, and since the airport is closed, there is no business, so there is going to be some sort of passing on. Airlines business itself, catering, has been going down over the past few years with budget airlines coming on, people squeezing the menus and looking at smaller and smaller menus on airlines. So that food business has already been going down. Going forward, airline traffic is definitely going to fall. They're looking at leaving the middle seat empty, social distancing. Air tickets will go up, but food as a component then maybe a bigger amount of money might be spent on it because the ticket price would be higher and the passengers traveling on a certain aircraft would be lesser. So I believe that we'll go back to an era where airline travel was more restricted and more not that necessary. So if that happens and the value of your food item goes up, but it's been a trouble sector for the past 2 years anyway.
Anybody else wants to comment on that?
I think the rentals will play a very important role.
Mr. Vazirani said, which is a very important point, I think, for all of us, is the solution will also that we build in this crisis will also depend on the nature and scale of our operation. So this is something that he brought out very importantly. So if you're, multi-city, multi-restaurant versus single city, single kitchen versus only doing outdoor, not doing indoor versus doing all. So for example, we do food even for the Bryan Adams concert. But the challenge you face going forward is not only the distancing issues will come into play, how we deliver also will change, and that will depend on the scale of our operation. So I think Vazirani made a very important point that the solution that we're looking for, first we have to look at our own business and its size, and then work through that to decide what can work and not work for us.
Sure. So we have another very interesting question from Mr. Krishna Kumar Thangavel. If we can pass him the audio, please. Mr. Thangavel, are you there?
Yes, hello.
We can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Hi, this is Krishna Kumar Thangavel from Coimbatore. We are doing a family wedding business for the past 30 years as a second generation. For the massive crowd, like 50,000 people, we did a maximum. And also we have started a corporate industrial kitchen by 2015. And we are the major corporate caterers in Coimbatore. We are doing corporate kitchen for all corporates like Bosch and German companies, and we have institutional and industrial catering. So we are doing 15,000 covers per day across 3 kitchens in Coimbatore, and with the manpower of 400 resources. So already we have got a request from the corporates to reduce the 15% price reduction from our existing revenues pricing. So the total industry is literally shaked because of the inflation last year. So everyone is struggling with the cost control, and with this scenario, how to match their price and how to retain the client. That is my question.
Mr. Sanjay Kumar from Eliot.
So the first thing is, it's as a service provider, we have to choose the customers we wish to service because you're in the B2B business, okay? And if in a crisis, the customer doesn't see you as a partner to work through the crisis with you and just wants you to take on the burden of his crisis without a longer term solution, there is a very difficult problem to sort out, and you need to think hard which kind of customers you need to do business with, because I don't think it makes business sense to bleed your P&L during a time of crisis, because you don't know how long the recovery will be and what it will be like. If the economy was in an upswing, you can take a bet that I'll have a portfolio of customers in which some will be profitable, some will drive revenue, some will give me margins, and as I continue to grow, I will leverage my full cost base to become profitable. But you're not going to be able to have 50,000 packs weddings for a very long time to leverage your cost base. So to that extent, if you have to be running your ship, my view would be that you have to make sure that at least you're not bleeding cash, because nobody's going to fund that loss. So the conversations with customers are going to be difficult. Just like you, we have the same conversations. But we are prepared to make the hard decisions, but not in a crisis. We don't want to take risks which bleed our P&L.
Okay. In the same vein, we have also got Mr. Rakesh, Mr. Kumar, who's asked the question that in the corporate sector, a lot of employees will be working from home. And do you see any chance to address the segment through deliveries?
So I'll give you our experience in this. So when this crisis happened, we were doing about 40,000 meals with Swiggy and Zomato to service the migrant labor and, to help out with our infrastructure for them to get food. But the challenge you face is that who takes charge? See, when we were doing the migrant labor thing, it was there were NGOs involved like CRISIL Foundation and so on and so forth. So the objective was very simple, just deliver the food for people. But when you start delivering this food home to your delivery partners on, say, for a lunch or for a dinner, that model then becomes very different because for each individual, you need something different or you need to standardize some basics. So the kind of kitchen infrastructure you need to do that is very different. And like Sanjay was saying, is very different from what you need for a large scale production. It depends how your kitchen is designed. Is it modular enough to be segmented that you can say, okay, this will be a section which will cater to a smaller set of numbers with a standardized menu, and that is what you will deliver to homes? Then it may be possible. But by and large, if people are working from home, they will end up ordering through Swiggy or Zomato rather than through the service provider who's giving the food at work.
Sure. Our next question comes from Mr. Raghavendra Latkar. If we can give him the audio, please.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon to all the panelists. My name is Raghavendra Latkar. I am from Surat. We're into business of shrimp farming, and we also have a prawn specialty restaurant in Surat. So my question to Mr. Vazirani and Mr. Samir Lamba is, do you think that the frozen foods or ready-to-eat frozen foods, that trend will go up, or people might hesitate to eat non-veg after this pandemic? I want your suggestion on this, please.
My personal view, Raghavendra, is that the frozen food consumption will go up. People might be slightly wary to kind of, buy and scratch cook non-vegetarian food because still the handling of, non-vegetarian food in our part of the world is not as sophisticated as it needs to be done. But I think frozen food, because people believe that, it's in the right environments. At least what I know of, frozen food is definitely under all possible hygiene care it takes to do it is done. So to me, it will be a exponential increase in the consumption of frozen food.
I also definitely agree with Sanjay that the frozen food consumption will go up. We are also getting more and more handling capabilities and delivery capabilities for the supply chain. And that is one factor. Today we have more than n number of agencies which are handling supplies to get that food to us at the proper temperature, which was not happening. We have hyper-local companies who are again willing to pick up stuff from one restaurant and take it to the other restaurant, keeping the temperature in mind. So frozen food is definitely going to go up. You don't need to worry. Non-vegetarian consumption in the short term has gone down. We Indians are very, very hesitant when there's disease to eat non-vegetarian food, but believe that it's just going to go up. There's nothing you need to worry about there.
Sure. Our next question comes from Mr. Amritesh Virdi.
Hello everyone. My question is open to. Yeah, my question is open to all the panel. I want to know how strong is the future of home delivery model, the dark kitchens and cloud kitchens, considering that people want to view everything what is being cooked, and they also consider what is not visible is probably what is the safety and hygienic level of the kitchens. How strong do you see this model?
Everybody's been talking about delivery going up, and it's definitely going to go up. There has to be some sort of a rating agency. Zomato itself has already started rating kitchens in terms of hygiene and cleanliness. This is only going to go up. There is also going to be FSSAI, which is going to say that you have to display your certificate, which will have a rating on it of your kitchen hygiene. So that will also help. So consumer will definitely know how you're rated from third-party consumers. That is how they're going to know whether your kitchen is hygiene or not. You can go on these websites and you can certify yourself right now also as this, and give a voluntary form. They'll come and check up your kitchen and they'll give you a certification.
Amitesh, I believe that we are looking at a very big opportunity wherein dining in and delivery is concerned. And we'll all have to be transparent in terms of our processes, in terms of our hygiene standard, in terms of how we take this on, this challenge of safety, and how do we build trust with our consumer base. So, as in, like, I work with a lot of restaurants wherein we have open kitchens, and why can't we have the same kind of a facility vis-a-vis with a camera installed and a link wherein any of my customers can have a peek in my kitchen before he or she orders. So it could be as simple as that. So we need to build trust with our consumer base. But having said that, delivery is going to be one of the biggest trends in years to come. I think more and more people will stop cooking at home, and they will be buying even home cooked food. Even the dal chawal can be ordered. Unlike we've traditionally been to, Indians are very, very different in terms of when we eat out and when we cook at home. We go for dal makhni when we go outside, but we cook pili dal at home. But today in delivery, we can also order dal chawal. We can also order the basic food that we get at our home. It's a matter of building trust with the right processes and protocols to be followed.
Amitesh,
Sure.
your thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So when you talk about a delivery model, right now the problem with the delivery model are the people in the middle of it, right? There are high commissions and everything. The delivery business will go up, but does that mean that it's going to be profitable? Personally, I don't think so. So the profitability of a venture will depend upon what are the aggregators charging, or who in the restaurant fraternity or are coming together and forming a new delivery base to get riders. So we did a local project with one of our local restaurants in Gurgaon that we collectively took the 22 restaurants, and we said that we will hire the delivery boys ourselves because we don't want to be reliant on any aggregators. So first and foremost, the question would be that we have to become profitable also by the delivery model, wherein I think if we rely on Swiggy or Zomato, or we are never going to be profitable because they take a high chunk of the margin.
Sure. Thanks, Avar. Our next question is from Mr. Aman Sahni. If we can pass him the mic, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My question is in future, post the market recovers, if any small event, large event, whatever will happen, if any of the team members from the catering company or from the guest list or from any other vendor is found COVID positive post event, so what is there any procedure guidelines which are in process, or should we come up with something? So ethically it should be followed. What will happen to that? What will be the rescue of that? That each stakeholder should be informed. So that is the thing I had in mind.
Yeah, they're going to quarantine you for sure.
Yeah.
Aman, I think we're looking at a dynamic change. I think as a customer also, if I'm going ahead and booking a party, I would need to know prior who's going to cater, what is the name of the gentleman, where is he coming from. And as I said, even a health certificate could be demanded. And that is the kind of detailing that we are looking at going forward in the business. So irrespective of the number of chefs, irrespective of who's doing the transport, everything needs to be documented before we even step into so minimum number of people, but all that can be traced at the back end. And it'll be extremely unfortunate if somebody is COVID positive post the event. I don't know what will be the protocol, who will be responsible, but I think every individual that is a part of that party, and for that matter, the customer also. As in, what if the consumer is COVID positive tomorrow, and he's the one who's spread the virus for my employees? So everybody is at risk. So everybody who comes to a party needs to be traced, needs to be tracked, needs to be documented. I think that's the way forward.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I mean, God forbid if it does happen, then you're in for trouble, you know, because obviously you're going to have to then close your business down for a month or so before everything cleans out. So next question comes from Mr. Srinivas Rao. He's in fact addressing an important question of technology, which might be the future sometimes from now. Mr. Srinivas Rao, are you online?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Srinivas. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask a question. Like, just wanted to ask to the panelists, like, under such hygienic concerns and during the present situation or as well as the post-COVID, like, do you find any scope or implementation on automation or else robotic arms, such kind of aspects in any of your process?
So automation, yeah. So
no, go ahead, please.
Automation is definitely going to go up. In fact, we in one of our restaurants in Pacific Mall are experimenting with robo serving. So this is definitely going to go up, and it's one thing which could help. And contactless dining is going to have a very big space going forward in this. The entire concept of hospitality always has been contact with humans and this thing, but that contact is going to be in different ways through telecommunications, through distancing, and even there was a small video where somebody had a kind of a delivery thing where he had something like a jacksaw and he was pressing it and then delivering the food. So that is definitely the future, and automation always and will have a very big space in this line.
Okay. Anybody else who wants to talk about automation, robotics in the kitchen?
Yeah. So I think with or without COVID, that still will go on. Even as we speak, we were exploring options for automating the entire pot wash and handling, automating the entire production of some of the food items. So that will happen. The big challenge I feel is, do we think COVID is going to be a solution, a problem for which there will never be a solution? Personally, I don't think so. So to that extent, to expect that the way we consume food will change forever, and our lives will never see to what we saw in the past, I think that's taking a very, very, it's a very difficult view to subscribe to, because sooner or later, we've come out of most difficult viruses in the planet. Okay, so at some stage, it may not be 12 months, maybe 18 months, maybe 24 months, the jury's out. It will not permanently change the way we consume food. Like somebody said, food was about contact and personalization. It will come back. The only question is when. So you cannot radically revisit the model on its premise, because this is not something which is happening because technology has made a difference to how we consume. It's just a virus that has made a difference to how much fear it has created in how we consume. So to that extent, it is temporary in my mind. Technology will be an enabler in building efficiency, but that it would be even if COVID didn't exist. So to that extent, some of the status quo will continue. Consumption habits in the shorter term, which is anything between 6 to 18 months, but 6 to 18 months in the life cycle of an industry is not that big, I think.
Sure. Our next question is coming from Mr. Dibyandu Bindal. Can we have him online, please?
Yeah, hi. My question is especially to Mr. Vazirani. I want to know what will happen to banquets, that are there on rent, bigger grounds with a minimum guarantee commitments. With the current season wiped out, do you see rentals going down? How would they sustain?
Mr. Vazirani? Mr. Vazirani, you're on mute. You need to unmute.
Yeah. So, banqueting spaces will have to be remodeled where, social distancing, it's very easy to do so. We run one of the banqueting menus here in Bombay, where we have already started to earmark that what kind of placement of food and what kind of, thermal thermometers we would have for the entry to exit. It could be all COVID proof. We will be obviously renegotiating the number because, I think post-COVID, based on the situations, everybody will have to revisit the rentals which, banquet halls are kind of paying currently. At a peak, it looks like a very exciting business and, people think from the heart when they spend at the wedding rather than the mind. And that has kind of, kept the rental or the real estate space to be fairly expensive when it comes to built banquet hall leasing. So I think one is that you need to rework your number when it comes to your rental. And two, I think you should be able to model it in a way, if you're running it still, then you can keep provisions for social distancing and all the apprehensions which people will have can be addressed in an indoor banqueting like a 5-star hotel.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Vazirani. We have one question from Rohit Yadav, which will be the last question we'll take from the audience.
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rohit. I am from Bombay. I run a catering company, and we specialize in film caterings, RR Catering Services. So one of my concerns has always been, but now it is more, is that how can we increase the shelf life of food using technology? Because you know what, we usually deliver food, okay, and we serve them also. But I see in near future that we will be just delivering food and disappearing, and client would help himself with the service of food. So how can we ensure that we have a benchmark of the food safety in which the shelf life of the food can be increased, or the client can be warned that he has to consume the food within 4 hours, some kind of way in which the client cannot in future blame us that we are the reason for which the food went bad, or he had some of the health issues.
This one I can tell you, because when we were doing the food for Swiggy and Zomato for the migrant worker, we used to sticker the packs safe for consumption till 1:30, because we had a lot of concern that what if somebody who's eating the food at 4 o'clock and falls sick, the media fall out from that. So all food deliveries now will have to mandatorily have a, best to be consumed before, so that, and to some extent you have to keep samples of what you are dispatching, so that if there's a microbiological test required to ascertain if your food contaminated the person who consumed it, you can show what you dispatched, and that's the only safety bet you can have.
So in terms of technology, I'd like to add, there is a lot of technology available in storage of food. So modified atmosphere packaging is one MAP where you could pack your food and you could vacuum and put in some inert gases like nitrogen and CO2, and that would increase at least your shelf life of that food by 3 times. So that is one of the simpler ways, and you could study it online, and that technology is readily available.
Sure. We've had a great discussion, but there is one question I would like to ask all of you, is that what are the so my question is in 2 parts. That what is the short-term change that you're looking to bring in your business today, which could be to do with cost cutting, or which could be to do with management of cash flow? And then what is the long-term or a structural change that you're all looking to bring in the business in order to make the business more sustainable and, more profitable for you in the long run? So let's start with you, Mr. Lamba.
So short-term changes, we have no business. I just want to keep my employees, paying them their salaries, and at least they have food in their houses. Their well-being is the primary concern at this moment. We are also doing some meals like everybody for charity, keeping our staff busy, keeping our machines and kitchen going in some ways like that with the help of the government. The second long-term change, I think this is one disease, COVID. There could be another one next year, another one next year, and we need to be ready for that. And so this is all a learning which should never happen again. Safety standards, training, masks. This is all a reality. In fact, yesterday from all of our international companies, we got IHOP designed masks. We got designs. So it's already happening. And this is a reality. We're going to see a lot more masks. I always used to go to China and always wonder why these people wear masks. But I think this is going to become a reality here. So long-term automation, keeping ourselves hygienic, being more and more stringent about how we handle food, and short-term, keep our employees alive.
Nice. Mr. Vazirani?
So to me, we obviously have an opportunity, I would call, in these times, which have never come before, to segregate, good cost, bad cost, to stay frugal. I think, that's one mistake most of us, make, where we tend to bloat up costs unknowingly or unnecessarily, because catering is a seasonal business, and come October, we start feeling rich, and most of the employees have that mindset over years that from October, November, December, January, February, and some part of March, and all of a sudden revenues vanish. So during those times, we do tend to put on a lot of flap. So as a policy, we have to distinguish between a good expense and a bad expense. Non-performers and people who are just, kind of loading fancies or perks of, out-of-line perks. All those we need to, I think, curtail and cut and stay frugal for future times also. Maybe COVID itself, shows a W kind of recovery where it reoccurs, and then if you have to face this again in mid of a season time, if things have normalized, you have to be prepared for all that.
Right. And long term, what is it that you're planning to change?
Long term, I think, we are trying to find more dependencies on businesses, because in these times of crisis, a lot of balance sheets are going to be doing super well. I know a few people who do frozen food factories who have some kind of chilled food factories are there. So we should diversify a little to de-risk our business from just, one catering.
Sure.
I think logical extensions of businesses we at Foodlink will definitely identify and get serious about. Those were on our minds for long. We never kind of time frame them or put a timeline or a milestone to them. Now we'll do that and go forward, and we'll try to be in a little varied lines of food where if something goes wrong, we still have 1 or 2 lines of businesses going.
And where do you see such immediate opportunities?
I think frozen food, we are taking it very seriously. As I said, it's not going to cost us too much to kind of, do chilled food or packed foods. Currently, we're doing some survey with Star Bazaars and a few other, hypermarkets and local markets. There is a need, and once acceptances come, people are very wary in India of frozen food or chilled food. But I think this time has brought them to taste it and realize that it's as good as, it can get when it comes to kind of hygienic food, with very less risk. You just microwave or reheat it and eat. So we're exploring that. We do not know where we get. But I think that's one track I would like to take. Apart from, of course, the QSR or a express or a live versions of our India Bistro, China Bistro.
Sure. Mr. Sanjay Kumar?
So I'm not on mute, right? Okay. So I think for us, education and healthcare will be 2 segments we'll focus more on. Traditionally, they were less profitable than food at work, which is corporates. So in the short term, of course, so longer term, that would be the view. Shorter term, yes, conserve cash. Somebody said, look at the bad costs. Okay, I think Sanjay, you said that because you tend to incur a lot of this when the business is in steady state. So clean out some of those costs from the P&L and ensure that your key resources are retained going through this crisis, because post-crisis, we don't know how people will move across states and across boundaries. So getting skills also will become a big challenge, because even now we are seeing some of those who have gone back to their hometowns and villages. They are not contemplating to return. And a lot of states don't have the necessary skills if recovery has to be done to immediately provide for it. So shorter term, retain skills, focus on cash, clean up your non-performing, assets, and wait a day, basically.
And cost cutting, when you say what are the areas that you look to cut costs in?
So you see, catering traditionally is a capex-light business. Yeah, the bigger cost is in COGS and manpower. COGS I refer to as cost of goods sold. So if you can do menu rationalization, so that you and consumers and customers are now willing to accept a more simplified menu, because it also enables lesser tax for delivery. If we can do that better, then we can actually bring down the cost of production significantly, because it is those exotic items which really add to your production costs, and of course your logistics costs. So some of those costs won't go. For example, LPG continues to be very expensive, but definitely we will try to re-engineer menus, bring down COGS, see if there's automation that we can do to reduce manpower, and learn to live with a lot less than we have historically been used to. In banqueting, I don't see us, doing this business at least for the next year. The last one we did was Capgemini for 14,000 people, but I think those days are now over, and we'll have to wait a while before that segment revives. But education is going to start and manufacturing is going to start. So that'll be the short-term focus.
Sure. Mr. Sibal, you'll need to unmute, please. Please unmute.
Well, I have a mantra for this time is that before you win, you don't have to lose. So the idea is to sit tight, let this storm pass through, and become a slightly more leaner model to start with, as in renegotiate our rental terms, renegotiate things that hurt us in the past. Again, the bad cost, if there are people who are not delivering to the potential that we want them to, they need to take a salary cut or whatever that it needs to be done. And in the longer term, I believe I want to be ready or develop a product for the catering business for that 100, 150, 200 people capping, wherein it's ready to go in like an installed fashion where every touch point is covered. So I want to take this 3 months to develop a certain format that is plug and play for any catering need for that kind of a set of number of people, because I don't think so that 50,000 people catering events are going to happen in the near future. And when I say near future, I'm looking at 2.5 years. I think that sentiment to come back in the market will take its own time. I know food is a joyous feeling and everybody wants to connect with food. This is all we are doing in COVID times. I think everybody is cooking. But having said that, nobody will take the risk to have these many people around for a catering gig, and they will be more socially responsible. So that 100, 150 people, can we develop a model which is safe, which can be tracked, yet interesting, and what do we say, gourmet enough to tantalize our guests. I was thinking yesterday, I was speaking to one of my chefs we were thinking, what if one of the functions for an event could be done by home, wherein pre-made kits could be given with a video CD of how do you prep it up, and everything is content and everything comes online together for one particular function, like a pre-wedding function. These are formats that we'll have to work with event planners, we'll have to work with, event agencies, in terms of how do we build that experience back without actually having that number of people together. So I don't know, we'll have to be creative.
Sure. Savar, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, please.
One thing for the short term, I completely agree with Samir that there is no business. So it would be not to think too much right now and just save cash, because you don't know how much time it would take, when everything will return to normalcy, everything. Another thing would be to diversify. So the things which are coming to my head are with packaged food and everything. There's something like masalas also. So we've been making our own masalas for the last 72 years, and we intend to take it out now and make a couple of few so that they will not be affected in the restaurant sector. And with the catering, again, we will work out on smaller menus and everything, but it really depends on how the situation would be in another 7 to 8 months. That is only when you will be able to say, okay, what I thought we can implement or we can't, because there is uncertainty at the current situation.
Sure. Thanks very much, everyone. I mean, if I were to just sum up some of the key takeaways that I took from this discussion, I think it is primarily that, menu rationalization, number one, is very important. We need to have smaller menus. We need to understand local sourcing. We need to be able to play with whatever ingredients are available in the market and therefore be able to do the most with them. Secondly, reduce your costs. Whether it is your manpower cost, whether it is your food cost, whether it is your, the place or where you are located, those costs, you need to rationalize them today. You need to bring down your fixed costs. You, of course, need to bring down your variable costs in order to do a business. Right now, of course, from the look of things, we really don't know when the business will start. So therefore, as less costs as you have, the better it is for you. Number three, diversify. You've probably been focused on only one aspect of catering so far, but look into other areas. You can look into packaged foods. You can look into corporate catering if you're only into wedding catering. If you're into corporate catering already, then also you should look at within corporates, what kind of corporates you're serving, schools, hospitals, travel. These are all areas that would be the future of, would need catering and should be looked at. And for some, it might actually come from some different streams like delivery or even opening cloud kitchens, which could be a viable model. Pre-cooked or meal kits might be another area that a lot of people in the industry, in the catering industry, should be looking at in order to be able to service small industries. One area which nobody has touched, but I do think that it could be important, Mr. Vazirani just touched upon it, is how can we service to the retail industry in terms of can we put out food processing is becoming a very, very large industry as it is. And can we put out more food out there, which is packaged food that people can buy and then look at it becoming a brand. And finally, I feel that the catering industry is not going anywhere. People are eventually going to eat food. But of course, anybody who is going to be able to provide good health, safety, standards of food is the one who's going to prosper more. And of course, look for some integrations, look at joint ventures, look at merger and acquisitions models so that resources can be pulled in and then everybody can be profiting from it. So these are some of the great areas that have been brought out by panelists today. Thank you very much for joining us today and sharing these ideas. Over to you, Pratima.
Thank you, Ritu.
Thank you, Mr. Vazirani.
Thank you.
Pratima, are you online?
That's right. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you all the panelists. It was a very, very interesting session. Before we close, so we did 2 polls and I would very quickly, announce the result of that. The first one was on how can catering industry build cheaper and leaner financial and operational management system post-COVID-19. 44% people say through food cost management, 28% people say through creating online experience, and about 27% people said through food safety. We had about 100 plus people voting for this. The second poll, I'm just trying to find that. The second poll was what are the top reasons for the growth of catering industry? About 2% people cross-region specialities, 31% people said interest in catering services, and about 31% people say through corporate culture. That's it for today. It was wonderful to have you all here. We wish to see you again in the near future and hopefully offline and not in the confines of your houses. Stay healthy, stay safe, everyone. We also have a very short survey link requesting all attendees to fill this for us to get some relevant feedback on this webinar. Thank you so much all for joining.
And a big thank you to all our panelists for making this so very
guys.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.